ki. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki. BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki. Jam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Acharya Shtother Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki. Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki. Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Govinda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mathura Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki jai. Shri Chaitra Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai. Ganga Maya ki jai. Jamuna Maya ki jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Harinam Sankirtan Yagya ki jai. Gantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritam Naram Jaiva Narottamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Shevaya Bhagavate Uttama Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance on classes in the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome in the heart is practically eradicated. In loving service to the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established in the heart as an irrevocable fact. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, one should offer his respectful obeisance to the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Hare Krishna, everybody. It's always nice to have everybody. We're really especially happy to have Ramnam and Chandrika back. They always help turn the nectar. Welcome, John. Mary. So we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, chapter number 20, text number 33. And now Maitreya is speaking again. Tatvam kuru mayadishtam. I'm sorry, it's Maitreya. I don't know if Maitreya is speaking or not. Second here. Apramata prajapate. Maradesha karolaka. Sarvatropnoti shobhanam. Tatvam kuru mayadishtam. Apramata prajapate. Maradesha karolaka. Sarvatrapnoti shobhanam. Tatvam kuru mayadishtam. Apramata prajapate. Maradesha karolaka. Sarvatrapnoti shobhanam.
Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Apramata prajapate.
Apramata prajapate.
Madadesha karoloka.
Madadesha karoloka.
Sarvatrapnoti shobhanam.
Sarvatrapnoti.
Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Apramata prajapate.
Apramata prajapate.
Madadesha karoloka.
Madadesha karoloka.
Sarvatrapnoti shobhanam.
Sarvatrapnoti shobhanam. Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Tatvam kuru mayadishtam.
Apramata Prajapate
Apramata Prajapate
Madadeshta Karo Lokaha
Madadesha Karuloka
Sarvaprapnoti Shobana
Sarvatrapnoti Shobhanam
Tatam Kuru Maya Dishtam
Tatvam Kuru Maya Dishtam
Mamata Prajapati
Apramata Prajapate
Shakalalokam
Madadesha Karuloka
Shobhanam
Sarvaprapnoti Shobhanam
Tatvam Guru Mayadishtam
Tatvam Kuru Maya Dishtam
Prajapati
Apramata Prajapate
Karoloka
Madadesha Karaloka.
Sarvaprapnoti Shobana
Okay, word for word. Tat, therefore, Twam, you, Kuru, do, Maya, by me, Adishtam, what is ordered, Apramataha, without being misguided, Prajapate, O master of the citizens, Mat, of me, Adesha, Adeshakaraha, who executes the order, Lokaha, any person, Sarvatra, everywhere, Apnoti, achieves, Shobhanam, all good fortune. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Abhay Charana Devinda Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki. My dear King, O protector of the citizens, henceforward be very careful to execute my orders and not be misled by anything. Anyone who lives in that way, simply carrying out my orders faithfully, will always find good fortune all over the world. Please repeat. My dear King, O protector of the citizens, henceforward be very careful to execute my orders and not be misled by anything. Anyone who lives in that way, simply by carrying out my orders faithfully, will always find good fortune all over the world. Srila Prabhupada's purport. This is the Lord speaking. The sum and substance of religious life is to execute the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one who does so is perfectly religious. In Bhagavad Gita 1865, the Supreme Lord Krishna says, Manmana bhavamad bhaktaha. Just think of me always and become my devotee. Furthermore, the Lord says, Sarvadharman parityaja mam ekam sharanam vrajaha. Give up all kinds of material engagement and simply surrender unto me. This is the primary principle of religion. Anyone who directly executes such an order from the personality of Godhead is actually a religious person. Others are described as pretenders, for there are many activities going on throughout the world in the name of religion, which are not actually religious. For one who executes the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, however, there is only good fortune throughout the world. Beautiful. Verse and purport. Om Jnana Tamarandhyasa Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagana Raganathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavan Ishvari Vishubhana Shuti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavari Pashtachadesh Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vanacharine Prabhupada Vallabhaya Singhasi Lavanurine Agyana Dvanta Gamana Pashta Chapatitatmanam Gyana Gurute Chitarine Chakshashe Namaha. Aye. So we have a great lesson here to be learned in this verse. Because this verse, the thing about the Bhagavatam is every verse is Krishna. Every verse is filled with transcendental knowledge. Krishna swadamo pagate dharma jnana dibisaha. Kalo nasta drishamesha paranarko dunoditaha. This Bhagavat Purana is brilliant like the sun and has arisen just after the disappearance of Lord Krishna to his own abode, accompanied with knowledge and religion. Those who have lost their vision due to the dense darkness in the age of Kali will gain light from this Purana. So this Purana is specifically designed for us who are living in Kali Yuga so that we can gain light and understand the essence of spirituality, the essence of who we are. So this verse is essentially putting forth the ultimate principle of religion and the ultimate principle of bringing auspiciousness and happiness into our lives. That anyone who lives in that way simply by carrying out my orders faithfully will always find good fortune all over the world. So this means pure devotional service. By engaging in pure devotional service, one will become fortunate in every aspect of their life. But they have to do the process properly. This is the key. So the Lord is giving us an order. And what is the Lord's supreme order? So the Bhagavad Gita explains varieties of dharma because Krishna is speaking on different levels to different people. But the ultimate teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives at the very end. Manmana bhavamad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mameva shashi shatyamte pratijani priyosime. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your homage unto me. In this way you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you're my very dear friend. This is Krishna's final instruction. And then he says, besides that, sarva dharman parityaja, abandon all the other dharmas, mame kam sharanam braja, make me number one, surrender to me. Then I will relieve you from all your sinful or karmic activities. Do not fear. So the whole Bhagavad Gita kind of leads up to these two verses. And there's only very few verses. I think this is the only verse in the Bhagavad Gita that repeats itself. Is Mamana Bhavamad Bhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru. Krishna says that at the end of the 9th chapter also. To always think of him and to become his devotee. So why does Krishna say this twice? Krishna says this is the most confidential knowledge, the most confidential part of Vedic wisdom is to understand the aspect of personality of Godhead. So, how do we say? There's so much knowledge out there. There's so many paths. There's so much transcendental meditation, so much information regarding how to elevate the consciousness. And the Bhagavatam explains, Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advyam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. That the great learned scholars who are studying transcendence understand the absolute truth in 3 different ways: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So Brahman realization is capable for the Gyanis, those who are discerning matter and spirit as a practice can understand what is Brahman. Therefore, they actually achieve their eternal aspect. They achieve the eternality of their consciousness. They realize themselves as Brahman and they understand themselves as eternal. But they have no access to the knowledge and bliss portion of their identity. So that word jnana is interesting. That jnana word is the same word as knowledge. It's the gya, that sound. And then actually the word Gnostic, we hear about Gnostic Christianity. That's also coming from the word jnana. So that's the element of yoga by which one is discerning matter from spirit in order to achieve gnosis or jnana, in which they can understand themselves as an eternal living entity. So that's a lower level of realization. That's Brahman realization. And then from Brahman realization is Paramatma realization, or realization of the super soul within the heart of every living entity, of every atom. This is achieved by the process of mystic yoga, Ashtanga yoga, which is a very high qualification in order to even practice. And then higher than that is the Bhagavan realization, or the realization of the personality of Godhead, who's transcendental to time and space. That is achieved only by bhakti. Bhakti mam abhijananti yavanyashtasmi tatvataha. That Krishna is explaining that I can only be understood as I am through the process of pure devotional service. So why is it that devotional service is so powerful, is so wonderful, and why is it that it gives one good fortune throughout their lives and all activities? And the reason is because one is gaining the blessings of the Lord. One is entering into the internal potency of the Lord. So we understand ontologically that the creation is made up of three primary energies. One of them is external or material energy, matter. One of them is spiritual energy, or God. And one of them is marginal energy, which is the living entity who can either identify with matter or with spirit. So that's us. We're called marginal energy. The Jiva soul is marginal energy. And therefore, in the material world, the Jiva soul is identifying with matter. And in the spiritual world, the Jiva soul is identifying with spirit. It's identifying itself as part and parcel of Krishna. And that identification is essentially what affects or what controls our object of service. So if one is identifying with matter, they render service to matter. Namely, they're serving the five senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. And this is what we see in the world today. Because of this simple illusion, I'm this body and this is mine, the object of people's service is matter. Essentially, they're serving whatever they're serving, whether they're serving their country, whether they're serving their gross senses, whether they're serving their wives or husbands, their bosses. They're serving that in such a way that they're propagating this consciousness of I'm this body, because it's all based on how to satisfy my mind and senses, or to satisfy I, meaning I'm this body, my mind and senses, or mine, my wife, my children, my country, my race, my planet. All these things are simple illusions based on the bodily conception of life. But when one takes that same consciousness of service, that same propensity to serve, and then serves the spiritual world or the spiritual matter, one achieves a very different result. One awakens his or her transcendental identity as part and parcel of Krishna. And that service is satisfying to the self. It says, Haitu Kyapratiyata Yayatma Supersediti, that if we want Yayatma Supersediti, the complete satisfaction to the self, one has to engage in unmotivated and uninterrupted service to the Supreme Lord Adhoksajay. So that service is pleasing, is satisfying. Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is the essential, Prabhupada calls it the handbook of Bhakti Yoga, which Prabhupada rendered into the Nectar of Devotion. In that book, it's described that there are 6 symptoms of Bhakti Yoga, like Luttapriya was speaking about on Sunday. 6 symptoms of Bhakti Yoga. 2 of them appear at the beginning stage, 2 of them appear at the intermediate stage, and 2 of them appear at the final stage. So the beginning stage is called sadhana bhakti, which is where we're all practicing, or we're attempting to practice sadhana bhakti. So sadhana bhakti is Bhakti Yoga in practice. Namely, we don't have attachment to the Lord yet in a spontaneous way. Our love for the Lord is not exactly manifest in full yet. The residents of Vrindavan, or the pure devotees of God, have spontaneous attachment to Krishna. They don't have to wake themselves up to chant their rounds. They don't have to set an alarm. They're simply waking up and chanting out of pure love. It's spontaneous. They don't want to stop because they're having a relationship with Krishna. That's called Raga Nuga Bhakti, or Bhava Bhakti, Prema Bhakti. Whereas the Sadhana Bhakti practitioner, Vaidhi Bhakti, he's following a set of rules and regulations that are given by a spiritual master so that he can awaken that consciousness of spiritual spontaneous love. So if we practice the Vaidhi Bhakti process properly, namely following rules and regulations, or following the yogic yam niyams of Bhakti Yoga properly, then we still get 2 very wonderful results. One of them is Shubhadha, we attain all auspiciousness. And one of them is kleshagni. All material miseries are burned away. So we can understand that if we are not experiencing kleshagni, if we're still experiencing trouble in the mind, if we're still experiencing essential material misery, we've not actually begun to practice sadhana bhakti in the proper way. We're not doing it with the right attitude. There's a hole in our ship. We're trying to sail across the ocean of material existence, but it's like offensive rounds. You shoot a hole in your ship. Vaishnava aparad, you shoot another hole in your ship. And then you're starting to sink, not honoring prasadam, eating karmi food, sinking. And so then you're starting to sink. Whereas if you actually hold all the, if you conceal all these holes, namely all the offenses, all the things, and follow the regulations properly, then what happens is you very easily begin to cross over the ocean of material existence, and things become very auspicious, which is what the Lord is explaining in this verse. He's saying, anyone who lives in that way, simply carrying out my orders faithfully, will always find good fortune all over the world. So this is the difficulty here that we have, is that because of the mode of passion and ignorance, it becomes difficult to follow the orders of the Lord. Just like Arjuna, he was facing difficulty in following the order of the Lord. What was the Lord's order? To fight. The Lord was telling Arjuna, you should fight. And Arjuna was thinking, I can't fight because there's so many material problems that I'm going to have to face if I fight. And Arjuna gives 5 reasons for not fighting. One of those reasons was he was not going to enjoy. He was going to lose all the people he wanted to enjoy the kingdom with, so it wasn't worth even fighting. And one of those reasons was fear of sinful reactions, because he was not understanding the highest principle of religion. We say that there's so many sins, and the Christians say there's the 10 commandments, the 10 sins. But ultimately, there's one sin, and all the other sins are in relation to that. And this was kind of a struggle for me as I was growing up in the Christian church, the Catholic church, because I was thinking, well, it says, thou shalt not kill, yet we're killing animals. And it says, thou shalt not kill, yet people are going to war and killing each other. And it says, thou shalt not kill, but the police officer, in order to protect the mother being robbed, has to kill the robber in some event, and therefore is the police officer going to hell? So these were kind of like questions I was having even as a little kid. It doesn't really make sense, because I wasn't understanding the highest principle of religion, which Jesus did delineate, but it just wasn't so clearly extracted by those who are interpreting and speaking on the Bible. The highest principle of religion is always remember Krishna and never forget Krishna. Yat karosi, yat ashnasi, yat juhosi dadasya, yat tapasyasi konteya, tat karosa madarpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you offer, whatever you give in charity, whatever you eat, do that, O son of Kunti, as an offering to me. So the real sin is ignorance, is forgetting God. So we have to act according to God's order. And when we act against God's order, that's sinful. So based on one's duty, based on one's position, based on one's guna and karma, one may have a different duty. So a Kshatriya, his duty is essentially sometimes to kill. A Kshatriya's duty is sometimes to kill in defense of the people. So a Kshatriya may have to kill. Is that sinful? No, because that's the Kshatriya's duty if it's done according to religious principles. Prabhupada gives the example that a Vaishya may have to do business. And in doing business, sometimes you may tell someone, for you, I make no profit. Of course, you are making profit. And so the Vaishya, that doesn't mean the Vaishya shouldn't perform his duty, because he's maintaining his family, which is his duty to maintain his family. Therefore, he has to work in the world. And so Krishna explains that every endeavor is covered by some fault, just like smoke is covered by fire. Because we're in the material world, every endeavor is covered by some fault. So how do we avoid that fault? Krishna explains, Apichet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadar eva samantavyaha samyag vyavashito hisaha. Says that even if one commits an abominable activity, if he's situated in pure devotional service, bhajate mam ananyabhak sadar eva samantavyaha, he's considered a saintly person because he has unflinching devotion to God. And therefore, he is following the rules of God. Although he may be entangled in or seemingly be entangled in material situations. Yet because he's devoted to God and because he's not expecting to, someone who's a sadhu, if something goes wrong, if he ends up committing some sin, if he's actually devoted to Krishna, he doesn't try to get out of it. He accepts the consequences for his actions. And he accepts that as the just punishment from the Lord. But the thing is, the overlying thing is that he still never gives up his bhakti. So when it says, "O protector of the citizens, henceforth be very careful to execute my orders and do not be misled by anything." This is our issue, is distraction. We don't want to be misled by anything. And this implies tolerance, that we hear so much throughout the Bhagavad Gita and throughout Eastern spirituality in general and Western spirituality. The importance of tolerance, the importance of tolerating pain and suffering, and of being equipoised. But what does that actually mean? Because if we don't understand the goal of being equipoised, then we're not going to understand how to actually be equipoised. Because for someone who's not surrendered to Krishna, equiposition is simply a material reaction. It's the same exact thing as reacting. So what is actual equiposition? Was Arjuna just like this in the battlefield? No, he wasn't. He was killing people with immense might. So that's not equiposition. Equiposition means that no matter what we do, we don't give up our service or our prescribed duty from the Lord. That's equiposition. So there's going to be so much challenges, there's going to be so much struggles in devotional service, but we continue. And Krishna, he elaborates this. This is basic spiritual knowledge. He says, Matra sparshash tukonteya sitoshna sukha dukada agamai paino nityas tam tatikshava bharataha. That the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. One should learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Then he says, Yam hinav yatayante te purusham purushashaba samaduka sukham diram somrit tatvaya kalpate. That one who can tolerate and is the same in happiness and distress, he is eligible for liberation. So it is in this execution of Krishna's order in an unflinching way, in a way that we continue to chant our rounds, we continue to practice sadhana bhakti, we continue to preach whatever our service may be. We continue that service no matter what happens to us materially. We remember Krishna, and therefore we are blessed with all auspiciousness. We were just speaking, and I was telling to Darnell that, sometimes Harinam is such a difficult service, because for a devotee to go out on 4th Avenue at 7:30 at night and to all the things we see, all the inauspicious things we see, and do that every week, 2 times a week for years and years and years. It's it's like sometimes we don't necessarily want to do this stuff materially. I don't feel good, so many things that may happen, but the fact is that we continue doing it because what is our duty? Harinama 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 eva kevalam kalo nasteva 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 gatiranyataha. The duty of every living entity is to engage in God's service. And what is God's service in the age of Kali? The primary service for all living entities is chanting the holy name. This is the Yuga Dharma prescribed in the Vedas. Every Yuga has its own Dharma, and the Yuga Dharma for Kali Yuga is the chanting of the holy names, and to give Krishna consciousness to other people by chanting those names. So we go out, and what happens is if you continue performing your service equipoised, you end up getting mercy. When Krishna explains there's 3 types of renunciation: renunciation in the mode of goodness, renunciation in the mode of passion, and renunciation in the mode of ignorance. This renunciation in the mode of goodness is one who performs one's duty without any expectation of result. He does it simply to satisfy God. So we have to perform our activities in Bhakti Yoga simply to satisfy Krishna. And if we do it like that and we're consistent like that, then we get the mercy of Krishna. And what does that mercy look like? That mercy looks like my orders faithfully will always find good fortune all over the world. So we'll find good fortune. What's that good fortune? We become happy. We begin to realize that I'm not this body. Because Krishna explains in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that by performing sacrifice, one gains transcendental knowledge. What is transcendental knowledge? Usually in the Bhagavad Gita, jnana refers to knowledge of the soul above the body, when one has actual realization that they're not this body. And Krishna explains many points in the Bhagavad Gita also that when one has that knowledge, one then engages in bhakti yoga. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavamam prapadyante. So when one realizes I'm not this body, it's easy to gaze in Krishna's service. So we have to perform some process of sacrifice. So how do we know what is our duty? It says, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshati te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshinaha. Just approach a spiritual master, inquire from him submissively, and render service unto him. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they've seen the truth. So by having a spiritual master, guru, sadhu, shastra, by having the devotees around, when you have that, and then they're giving you service, they're explaining the process, they're giving you suggestions of how to perform bhakti yoga, and you follow those instructions faithfully, then what happens is you become blessed with pure devotional service, and your life becomes super auspicious. All good fortune comes to you. We have to learn how to do that the proper way. That's why we have to inquire submissively and not speculate about what spiritual life is. Spiritual life is very scientific. It's a very scientific thing. It's not a speculative thing. It's not a feel-good thing. When you do it right, you get a very specific result. And that result is undeniable for those who experience it. Krishna says, Pratyaksav agyadarmam sushukam kartamavyayam. Pratyaksav agyamam dharmam means that this process of spirituality, this process of devotional service, brings about direct perception of the self by realization. Therefore, it's this perfection of all dharma. Susukam kartamavyayam. It makes one extremely happy, and that happiness is everlasting. So if one can achieve actual pure devotional service, then they get that result of susukam, very happy, everlasting happiness. So this is the result of practicing the process properly. But in order to practice it properly, we have to hear properly. That's why the first process of bhakti yoga is shravanam, to hear. We hear properly and we hear submissively. And in that way, one can become enlivened. Me and Gangamantri Prabhu have this ongoing discussion about Guru Tattva. It's like our katha. We hang out and talk about Guru Tattva every few weeks for about a few hours. It's really, really wonderful association. And one of the things that we were explaining is that if one approaches the Guru without the proper mood, then one will only achieve material knowledge from the Guru. We see that in the world today, so many so-called gurus, and they're giving only material knowledge. They have no transcendental knowledge. They're just giving advice, how to have a good relationship, how to be healthy, all this stuff. So in that way, they're just giving material knowledge. But even for a Vaishnav guru, if you don't have the right mood, you're not going to gain spiritual knowledge. But it's the mood and the attitude of the devotee that allows the guru to impart transcendental spiritual knowledge unto you. Because what is that attitude? Who's actually really giving us knowledge? Krishna says, Mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So it's from Krishna, from God. Krishna says, Sarvashyachaham hridi shani visto mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. That I'm in the heart of every living entity. And from me comes knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So Krishna's in your heart. And it's from him that you gain knowledge, spiritual knowledge, you forget spiritual knowledge, and you remember spiritual knowledge. So this is ultimately up to Krishna. So what is it that actually makes Krishna bestow that knowledge upon you? Tesham sadatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti te. Krishna says that when one constantly engages in my service with love, I give the intelligence by which he can come to me. I give him the understanding. So Krishna is saying, when you engage in my service constantly, tesham satatam yuktanam, constant, yukta means yoga, right? Satata means eternal. So when one engages in that constant connection with me, then I give them the understanding by which they can understand me and come to me. So it's the guru, it's the spiritual master who is inspiring us and giving us the process of sacrifice. He's inspiring us and he's giving us the service. This is why even, Srila Prabhupada, we understand he didn't have very much association with his guru, but his guru gave him an instruction multiple times. Go preach in the West, preach in English. And by that instruction of the guru, Prabhupada was able to assimilate so much spiritual knowledge. We can't even, if you read the purports of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it's talking about some of the things it's talking about, like, the rules of Sanskrit plays, Sanskrit dramas. And Prabhupada's giving elaborate purports on how to write a Sanskrit drama. And at the same time, Prabhupada's giving elaborate purports about everything you can imagine. Prabhupada was so expert because he was empowered by his guru to be of service. So when the guru gives that order to engage in service and we take that into our hearts and we engage in that service, Krishna gives us the understanding by which we can actually become empowered. But if we just take it as, oh, I have a guru, I practice spiritual life, look at me, then what happens is you just get material knowledge and you have no empowerment, you have no potency. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says that the most important verse in all of the Vedas is Yasya Deve Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tatagaro Tasyaite Katita Hyarta Prakasanta Mahatmanaha. Only unto those great souls who have implicit faith in the spiritual master and the Supreme Lord are all the Vedic is all Vedic knowledge imparted unto. So all knowledge is imparted unto that person who has Yasya Devi Para Bhaktir Yata Devi Tatagaro, who has implicit faith in the spiritual master and in the Supreme Lord. With that faith in the Guru and the Lord, and with the steady execution of his order, one will achieve good fortune all over the world. And everything they do, they'll be blessed. Because they're favored by the Lord. By what? By that, once again, that determination and that steadiness in your service is so important in Bhakti Yoga. Is that we're not gonna waver. It's one thing to be equipoised and not react, but if we're not doing service, if we're not engaging enthusiastically in service, then we're not going to get the result of devotional service. We may get the result of yoga, we may get some material knowledge, we may even get what's called sattvic knowledge, we may even understand I'm not this body, but we will not understand Krishna. And therefore we won't come to our full potential. So that understanding of Krishna, that comes from that intense bhakti mam abhijananti yavanyashtasmi tatvataha tatamam tatvato gyatas vishate tadanantaram. That when one is purified by such devotional service, they can enter into the kingdom of God. Vishate tadanantaram. They can go into the kingdom of God because they're purified by practicing pure devotional service. So Krishna explains, he says, how do you enter into this realm? Who's the presiding deity over devotional service? Who's the Radharani? Srimati Radharani, she's the presiding deity over devotional service. So that's why we say Hare Krishna. We're calling out the Radharani to engage us in Krishna's service. Because she's the ultimate servant of Krishna. She's the supreme servant of Krishna. She's the personification of Krishna's pleasure potency, which is giving him pleasure. So Radharani is called the internal potency, or the Hladini Shakti personified. So Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, he explains the process by how you enter, how do you get the favor of Radharani. He says, Mahatmanas tumam parta daivim prakriti mashritaha, that great souls, Mahatmas, the great enlightened souls are taking shelter of daivim prakriti mashritaha. They're taking shelter of the divine prakriti, or the divine energy, the internal potency. In other words, they're taking shelter of Radharani. And what do they do? Satatam kirtayantam mam. They always chant Krishna's glories. Yatantashdrajavrataha. They engage in determination. They engage in his service with determination. Dridravrataha means great determination. They're engaging in Krishna's service with great determination. Namashantashtimam bhaktya, and they're bowing down to Krishna with great devotion. So if we follow that instruction of Krishna under the guidance of a spiritual master, and we don't waver in that instruction, then we'll become successful in our spiritual lives. And therefore, we'll get the result of pure devotional service. Even if it's on the sadhana platform, we'll become very joyful and we'll become blessed in everything we do. And from that point, one develops ecstatic love for God, or bhava bhakti and prema bhakti. And that, the bhava bhakti says that one achieves unending bliss, and it's very rarely achieved. And even from there, Sri Krishna Karshani, one can control Krishna by his love, and that happiness derides the pleasure of liberation. So this is what the result of Bhakti Yoga is, that one gets blessed in every way, shape, and form. One is free of all material miseries, one experiences unending and uninterrupted bliss, although it's very hard to attain. One can control Krishna by his love, and that happiness even derides the pleasure of liberation. For the devotee, liberation into the impersonal is like going to hell. So this is what we're talking about here. If we do exactly what the Lord is saying here and do not be misled by anything. So it's important, last thing I'll leave here and we'll do questions, is remember the goal. And Srila Prabhupada once said that neophyte means he becomes distracted. And so we can become distracted even in our own movement, that if we think the goal is being temple president or being sannyas or being GBC, being guru, our goal is prema bhakti. Our goal is love for Krishna. Our goal is to enter into the pastimes of the Lord at the time of death. That's our real goal, is to have pure love of God. And so if we want that, then that may take a shape we're not, materially ready for. Because, it may look like, Kunti Devi, she had that pure love of God, but what was her material situation like? It was not so pleasant. So, ultimately, humility and tolerance is what spirituality is. And it's that, that trumps everything else. Even in our own movement, we may want some material success. And so that could, that can hinder our devotional service. So are there any questions or comments? Mother Sandamani, Prabhu?
Just to comment on that last verse that you quoted, Drita Vrata. Vrat also means vow. So it's not only you're determined, but actually you take a vow to serve Krishna and do principles of devotional service. It's actually very serious. But the result, like you said, is very wonderful.
Yeah, it's the Drita Vrata, usually like. Chandrika, thank you.
Is it that Krishna doesn't really need anything from us? Like, he doesn't really need our service.
Yeah.
But as we engage in, we have the opportunity, Krishna's giving us the opportunity to do devotional service. And through that opportunity, we're developing the love, because really it's about our attitude and our love. It's not that we have to do this. Yeah. So how do we really develop? I mean, obviously by doing devotional service, we develop that love, and that's, for us to understand that that's why we're really doing it.
Yeah.
For that.
So every soul has inherent love for God within it. But I was explaining that at the beginning stage, with the sadhana bhakti stage, because we're so covered over by the material energy, it's not so easy to act on that love for God. So we have to apply some discipline in our life. So Rupa Goswami, he explains that the very first instruction of spiritual life is Vacho Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, Jiva Vegam, Mudaparasta Vegam, Etan Vegam, Yobashaheta Dira, Sarvamapimam Prativim Sashishyat. That one has to control the forces of the tongue, the forces of the mind, the forces of anger, the forces of the belly, the forces of the genitals. And in that way, one can begin to practice spiritual life. So for someone who's a pure devotee, like, the gopis, that determination, that pure love is not so, what determination is there? It's so easy for them because they love Krishna. It's spontaneous. They just go for it. And, for like Mahavishnu Maharaj, he can chant japa I've seen him chant japa for 5 hours straight, and then get out and do another 5-hour kirtan. He's got taste for the holy name. He can keep chanting and keep chanting. For him, it's very easy. But for us, or for someone like me, we have to discipline ourselves in the beginning. So that takes determination. And that's why we have to have faith in the guru. We can see that, that Krishna is reaching out through the guru, and he's given us the opportunity to do devotional service. And especially by meeting the devotees and the guru, we're getting the opportunity to perform devotional service. And that's Krishna's greatest act of love. So in that way, we can be inspired to have determination. But as we go on later, that process becomes easier because we're getting a lot of taste in hearing and chanting. We're getting a lot of taste in the process. And so ultimately, everything comes down to love. And there's a verse in the 11th canto, I can't quote it exactly, where Krishna says, if someone has love for me, he basically says nothing else matters. He says, what if someone controls their senses? So what if they do this and that? Krishna says, if they have love for me, what else matters? But the thing is we can't take that love cheaply. That's not a cheap thing. That's a very high verse to talk about. That love is like real unflinching desire to please Krishna above everything else. So yeah, it's our attitude. And if we're not able to necessarily, do our service to success, like, we find there's devotees who weren't successful in necessarily what they were doing materially, but still, because of their attitude of loving service, Krishna was satisfied. But they weren't discouraged. Like, we'll just use Srila Prabhupada as an example. Even though he was successful, Srila Prabhupada had so much, discouragement. At so many times, Srila Prabhupada came across the ocean. It was cold. Prabhupada got his typewriter stolen. Prabhupada had so many things happen. And he could have given up, but he had that Bhajate Mama Nanya Bhak. He was unflinchingly devoted to Krishna out of love, and he had an attitude of service. And therefore, eventually, Krishna bestowed all his mercy upon him. But we have the attitude, but we don't. That part of that attitude of love is that we're going to continue doing our service until we can't anymore, even if it's of no avail. Does that answer your question? Thank you. Lalita Priya?
So I was listening to a pastime that Indriya Goswami Prabhu was talking about this morning. And Lakshmi Devi, she wanted to join the Rasa dance. And so she was doing all the things that the gopis were doing. She was training, to be a milkmaid, milking the cows and all this stuff. But she couldn't. She ultimately couldn't end up joining the Rasa dance because she had this mood of awe and reverence that kind of wouldn't subside. And so her doing those things like milking the cows and stuff like that was an austerity for her rather than doing it, like the gopis are doing that stuff, out of love because, one, that's their life. They're milkmaids, and but they're seeing Krishna, as their friend and not so much in awe and reverence. And I just thought that was really interesting to show, like, just how, you could be doing all the right things, but if your mind is not in the right mood, it can be for naught,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Krishna says, or Rupa Goswami says, Anyabhilashita shunyam jnanam karmanyanavritam anukulyena krishnana shilanam bhaktiruttama. He says that if you want to perform pure devotional service, you have to be free from karma and jnana, meaning you have to be free from mental speculation, and you have to be free from fruitive activities. And then he says, anukulyena krishnana shilanam bhaktiruttama, that one has to perform devotional service in a way that's pleasing to Krishna.
mm-hmm.
And that's the subtlety of devotional service versus karma yoga. Karma yoga means that I'm, following the commandments. I'm going to be saved, and I'm giving my acts to God. That's karma yoga. Bhakti yoga means I'm thinking about everything. How is this pleasing Krishna? How am I interacting with this person right now? How am I making this an offering to Krishna? How am I thinking, how is this going to please Krishna out of love? And it's essentially devotional service, or bhakti is intrinsically connected to bhakta. In order to perform bhakti, we have to serve the bhaktas. And therefore, bhakti is something that's done together in the association of devotees, because we're serving each other. And in that way, Krishna is more pleased than if we just serve the deity, or if we just even, chant alone. And we try to give other jivas bhakti. And in that, that's, once you begin preaching, it's like, or distributing books, whatever it is, to spread Krishna consciousness, you open up a whole world of, when you see someone on the streets, how are you going to treat them? Because you're trying to treat them like part and parcel of Krishna. And when you see another devotee, you have some altercation, how are you going to react? So that really makes you think about how to do things in such a way that this would please Krishna. And Krishna's, you get mercy by that consciousness. So it's all in the attitude. Suresh Prabhu, your last comment. Jim?
Just to follow up to Enrique's question, how do you wake up that love? You quoted the first verse of Nectar of Instruction, and the whole book, well, especially the first 7 verses are that the ways and means to do that.
Yeah.
What's favorable, what's unfavorable, the loving exchanges, how to see devotees, how to associate. It's a real primer of how to get restored to who we are.
Yeah, that book. I mean, I just mentioned the first verse, but I was thinking, like you just look at the nectar of instruction, those 11 verses, right?
Yeah.
It's each verse gradually elevates one, and then it says, ultimately, what do we need to do in bhakti? What do we don't need to do in bhakti? How do we treat each other? How do we love each other? And then eventually it ends up in, one should chant Hare Krishna at Radhakund. And that's, Raghunath Das Goswami level of love. So it's really powerful. So I read that book at least twice a year, all the way through. It's just worth it to read twice a year because it's so, empowering. Thank you, Suresh. I think we're out of time. Thank you so much. Grantharaj, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Chakriyuta Prasadam ki jai. Here,